Well, let's go ahead and kick things off. Hello and welcome everybody to another Red Talks. I can't believe it's our second one of this year. For some reason, this year has already felt like a year, and it's only been 2 months. I think a big part of that was probably last week's freezing incident, but we survived, and we're here, and we're ready to have a great discussion today. So today's topic is breaking through the noise, where we're at and where we're going. We're so thrilled to be having this conversation. It's really to discuss kind of where Texas Tech is at in terms of addressing diversity within our university and our community, seeing what we've done, what we're currently doing, and where we plan to go. And to help us with this conversation and to give us some input, some guidance, we have a lovely, fantastic, smart, incredible, however you want to explain them, panel for you today that we are so fortunate and honored to have. I'm going to go ahead and let them introduce themselves, starting with whoever I see on my screen, which up first is Nefertiti.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Nefertiti Beck. I am the director of the Student Intersectional Leadership Council in the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am very thankful to be here today. Thank you for inviting me.
We're happy to have you, Nev. Next is Mychael.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mychael Solis-Wheeler. I go by Myke. I am the current the compliance coordinator here for accounting services, and also, I've been I was a student at Texas Tech, so I'm very grateful that for that experience. Just to to share a little bit of my educational background as a student here at Tech. I got my undergrad degree in cell molecular biology. Then an M.B.A, and then since I love school so much, I got a master's in data science. And then while I was a student, I was also a student leader. I was the president for Pride STEM, which is a student organization for LGBTQIA and ally students in the STEM fields to support them. So I'm very grateful to be here. So thank you so much.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. That's such an extensive background, and seeing you being a student, now staff, like that's great. You've really been doing a lot for this university, and thank you for all that. Next, Dr. Sumner.
Hello, all. I'd like to say that for all the panelists, they're my people because we've been connected in some way or another. Myke didn't share, but he was a grad student here and helped to welcome me to Texas Tech University when I came in to this role. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity.
Sorry about that. I forgot that.
That's okay, Myke. I'm always going to claim you. So you can go as far as you like. Dr. Sumner always has a tether. Anyway, I'm very proud of him and of the work that we're doing. So it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Sumner. Yes, that's great. I didn't even realize all the connection, but that's gonna make this even better. Cory, you're next.
Hi, Cory Powell. Glad to be with you. I am director within the Office of Institutional Diversity, and I am fortunate to work with, or have worked with all of the panelists, and so I too count it an honor. I did go to Tech, also graduated, but Myke makes me feel like I was a slacker. Just want to go on the record.
No, he's definitely done a lot. I'm even wondering, I'm like, oh gosh, I thought I was doing good with my 2 masters, but I'm like, I need to catch up. My goodness. No, it's definitely great. Everyone has their own path, right? But well, thank you all for being here. Cory is actually our first returning panel. He helped get us started off back last year. So Cory, we're glad to have you again. And today we also are very excited to have a co-host. I have a co-host today, and I'm so grateful. She's amazing, and I love her and the work that she does here. And so everyone, I'm just gonna welcome Sandra. She helps make Red Talks happen. She helps get us everything together. She's just a rock star, and this is her debut as a host for Red Talks, and we're gonna be seeing a lot of her and hearing a lot of what she has to say. And I'm just so thrilled. Sandra, go ahead and introduce yourself for everyone.
Wow, Jake. Well, thank you for that. Like you said, my name is Sandra Otto. I work as the administrator for diversity and graduate student recruitment in the College of Ag Sciences and Natural Resources. It's an honor and a dream to get to have gone to Texas Tech for a couple degrees and now work here full time. I am co-chair for the Diversity Committee for Staff Senate, and I get to work with all of these wonderful people to make Red Talks happen. And I'm honestly beyond honored to do this today. So let's knock it out, Jake.
Yes, let's do it. Well, go ahead and get us started if you want. Yeah.
Great. So panelists, it is February, the second month of the year, and it is Black History Month. So can you guys let us know what Black History Month means to you, both on a professional level and also a personal level?
We're all kind of waiting for the others to go like, I don't want to go first. So I'm going to call on Nefertiti. See how I did that? She thought I was going to go first.
You would do that to me. You would do that to me. Okay. So for me, Black History Month is a time to reflect on the past contributions of Africans and African American people, or African people of the diaspora, to look at the contributions that have been made from the past, look at what's going on now, and look at the opportunities for the future as well. It provides me an opportunity to really dig deep into what has happened in order for me to be able to help shape a better future for myself and my family and my friends and the people that I directly or indirectly touch. And for professionally, it provides me an opportunity to bring together a committee to provide programming on education and to people, so people will be able to have a better understanding of the contributions of African and Black people, past, present, and what the future will look like.
I would also agree with Nefertiti said as well. Black History Month for me, personally and professionally, is a time to pay tribute and to remember, as well to continue the awareness and have those discussions on the awareness in terms of how it impacts our community, how it impacts not only our community of color, us being of Blackness, but also how that connects with our many diverse communities here in the U.S. And across the world. So that's what Black History Month means to me.
So as not to be called out, I will go next, and I'll let Dr. Sumner just, seal the deal. I certainly share the sentiments and agree with the comments that have already been stated. For me, it is an opportunity to celebrate the contributions and the legacy that I am now part of, and that my children will be stewards of for years to come and generations that are to come. I think it is important because so much of what is American history and world history omits the contributions of Black people, right? And so there's so many rich things, both in arts and in inventions and so forth. The way of life is certainly better because of all of those who contributed, but certainly I think it's important to highlight those who have been omitted. And so for me, it's an opportunity for me. And although I've been Black my entire life, I learn every year and every day some things that help me. And so I think that's an important part for us to share.
Well, and I think it's, I was looking for something because I saw it yesterday on the news. We don't have many Black holidays. And I'm just going to put that out there. And so our cultures and our traditions were lost for many of us in the voyage that was the transatlantic slave trade. And so many of our people, our histories, our celebrations, our traditions were lost. And this is a month, as Cory said, I'm Black every day. And so I am grateful for the opportunities to really bring a focus to the things that are the contributions based on individuals. And let's clarify, because Cory and I have gone back and forth. Tech used to call this African American History Month. It is not African American History Month. It is Black History Month, because everyone who is Black is not African American, and everyone who is African American is Black, but they are not interchangeable in that way. And so understanding, we're talking about the full gamut. You can be Afro-Latinx, you can be Black and Asian, you can be Black and white, Black and Hispanic, LGBTQIA, any of those. You are under the umbrella of being Black in America, and we need to be able to take the time to celebrate things. But it's also a time for us, so I was looking, there was a story on CNN that was talking about those who are omitted from history. And women have often not been thought as trailblazers or others, but recent events in the US have certainly brought to focus the power of Black women. And so I think we are taking the time to bring attention to those who have been forgotten or have not been celebrated, or where there are issues that we as a community need to come together as a Black community and then as a greater human community. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you all for all of that. Dr. Summer, kind of going off of something that you mentioned, just bringing it to kind of a tech focus, you mentioned that how before Texas Tech used to refer to Black History Month as African American History Month. So that's one of the changes that we're starting to see about like how to actually address this month and how to address, like you said, the history that the Black community has brought to not only our campus, but also to our country and to the world. What are, I guess, some of the current initiatives that are going on right now that kind of follow line to making these changes within our university?
Yeah, and I think everything, I'm pretty much an open book. Like anything that you have that happens in life, you should, with appropriate filter. And I was talking about filters. I have a soft filter on my eyes that causes things not to focus. So I get glasses that help me to clarify. I think as we think about diversity initiatives, and this was a conversation we had as a group, some might see it as a means to an end or a metric or a measurement. And I have long held the philosophy, and I'd want our community approach to initiatives to be, how do we celebrate, acknowledge, and affirm various members? It is not like feeling good and as though you belong is not about a count. And it's like, it's recognizing that diversity is both a noun and a verb. It is descriptive of the community and the people and all that we bring to the table. And it is a thing we do by identifying ways that we can celebrate, affirm, and make sure that people know they belong. And so particular to Black and African American experiences, there are things that are happening across the division. Certainly Nefertiti, I cannot take credit for having an incredible team, other than to say that I have been incredibly fortunate to have a team that is passionate and committed to finding ways that we can do this across the institution. And so Nefertiti and others within the division have worked as a part of a Black History Month celebration. Our Black Students Association, along with other members of Black student organizations, have worked to do programming. And in COVID, when we crave, like, communities in general, but I will say communities of color and minoritized communities, there is something about that getting together through singing and dance and song. You will have certainly step shows and other things that really feature some of the characteristics of being a community that celebrates through this vibrant way of celebrating. So Zoom is a challenge in trying to replicate that, but it is what we have for the time being. And so they're finding ways for us to be able to celebrate these traditions in doing programming. So there's a whole website, t-shirts, all of this other stuff that goes on. Cory is actually working with the Black Student Advisory Council, Black Student Alliance, that is athletes, Black Student Athlete Alliance. They are doing something called the Hidden Figures of Lubbock tonight. Please watch. See, Cory, how I type it? Because we need to do that. Next week, we have Dr. Glaude that's coming to speak. And why did we pick that? Oh, it's this week. Last week got me jacked up. But he's coming to speak. And one of the reasons why we're very excited is that we are going to be opening a Black Cultural Center here at Texas Tech. We will be 100 years old and have a 1-year-old Black Cultural Center. Like that, when you think of the histories of institutions, it is necessary, not because we're trying to segregate, but we are trying to amplify what it means to be Black and an African American and a scholar and a member of this community. And so that's going to provide us. So I can talk lots and lots of ways about what we do. I know we've got things going on with other events and programs, but our goal just around Black culture and African American culture, especially around this month, there are lots of things. But if I were to say, there's a story in the paper, my husband just said, this is why I can't go anywhere in public, because his wife's face is everywhere. We're #1 for Hispanic serving in an online institution. That's tech. That's what people are working towards. So we have lots to celebrate.
That's amazing to hear about, especially the Black Culture Center, and like you said, #1 Hispanic serving institution for online like that. Those are things that we don't get to hear a lot about, and seeing that they're happening, that's awesome. Yes.
Sorry, I also want to throw in as well, because I also used to work as a graduate student for the Office of LGBTQIA Education and Engagement. And Texas Tech is also, believe it or not, based on Campus Pride Index, which kind of highlights and evaluates universities' policies on, their support for the LGBTQIA community, student community. And we are #1 and, equal to one other institution here in the state of Texas, which is, it's a 5 out of 5 institution. So on that index, so it's pretty amazing too as well.
And what were we, Myke, a 3.5 or a 4?
Yes, ma'am. We were 3.5. Yeah.
And now we're a 5. And that speaks to the programs and services that are being done to serve the community. If I were to encapsulate it in everything, if I were to ask you all to remember one thing, how do you serve? Simple enough.
Simple enough.
And this is the article. It's in the Lubbock Avalanche. My colleagues were kind enough to put it there for me. So Texas Tech ranked #1 Hispanic serving online institution in Texas. Y'all should be proud.
Yeah.
Well, I will kind of steer the conversation in a different direction. But if you guys will remember back with me to the crazy year that 2020 was, and we saw a rise in movements and things that happened in our country and all over, specifically aimed at the Black community. And I know one of the first things that happened is I had tons and tons and tons of very well-intentioned people reaching out to me to ask what they could do and how they could help and everything. And within a couple of weeks, I was overwhelmed. I was tired. I didn't want to answer yet another question on what they should do, especially with the amount of resources out there. And I learned all about things related to racial battle fatigue and trying to make sure that people understand that we have a space here and why we need things as important as Black History Month and why several of these movements were important. So have any of you guys gone through similar situations in dealing with racial battle fatigue or trying to help other people work on being better allies in different situations?
I think most definitely I and most everyone that I know received similar calls, Sandra, emails, texts from well-intended people, as you stated, many of whom are not Black, and they just really wanted to they felt like they wanted help. They didn't know where to start. And people trust people they trust. And so I tried to keep in mind that they were reaching out from a good space. But as you articulated, it did become a little overwhelming because you're still trying to deal with your own emotions. And those of us who are parents or grandparents, for some place, right, you're trying to frame it for your children. I have a son who's here at Tech, a senior, and I have a daughter who's 14. And so how do you frame it, help them while you're dealing with yourself? And then you have other folks saying, help me help y'all. I was like, I think at the end of the day, it's just everybody was overwhelmed. Everyone felt a sense of sorrow in that moment, and people were reaching out. And so I just tried to keep it in check. But there was a point where I just had to turn off the television and I had to not answer the phone because it was becoming a little burdensome. So the battle fatigue that you mentioned is real.
Well, and I know Nef's gonna be like, she does this to, I don't pick on Nefertiti, but she's done some pretty incredible things. One of the things that she did was to create a healing space for students and community members to come together. Nef, can you kind of talk about that? Because I think that racial battle fatigue is real. And then when you're charged with caring for others, when you need space to protect your own soul, your own mind, your own health. But Nef was able to use her platform to create this. Can you kind of talk about that, Nef?
I'm starting to think that you're purposely calling on me.
She's a quiet girl, you know, I need to bring her out of her shell. She needs no introduction.
Well, I mean, as Cory was saying, it was definitely a tough year. Racial battle fatigue is real. There, like Cory, I had to disconnect. I had to stop watching TV. I had to get off social media because it was becoming too much. And I had to tap into some of those self-care mechanisms. And I think the healing space is part of that self-care mechanism. Being able to work with a great committee of people on campus to create the space. If you'd like to attend, they start Thursday. There's 5 different spaces. It's a time for us to come together to talk about how we feel about what's going on, how it's impacted us as BIPOC people, what it is that we can do to move forward. Like I said, it's a brave space for all of us to get together and really have those honest conversations about how we're truly feeling without having the fear of being ridiculed, without having the fear of someone saying, well, that's not right, or I don't agree with that. You can respectfully disagree, but you can't disagree with someone's experience, especially if you haven't lived that experience. So, like I said, it's an opportunity for us to get together and really look at what it is we need to do as BIPOC community to heal holistically.
And I raise it, if y'all think these are easy to do, this started being planned in the summer. And it has been a partnership. We know that some of our students are not going to counseling services for perception reasons, because they don't feel like people necessarily know. We want to bridge. We are not trying to replace, but we recognize that we need to find different ways to address the needs of people in our community by serving them. One of the things that have gone on pretty regularly, because there are parallel community issues. So the things that are happening here are not just happening alone. One of the things that I have greatly valued just seeing, although I have not attended them, are some of the social activities that have happened for LGBTQ. Again, there has to be a sense of coming together because we know someone. This world is far more connected than it ever has been before. So even if you don't personally know someone, which is possible, I won't say it's impossible, you can't escape it from social media. You cannot escape it from the news. You can't. And now let's layer on top of that. One of the early stories that I was sharing was one of Cory's stories of a dear friend who passed away from COVID. He's lost a number of friends from COVID. So now you're dealing with the racial battle fatigue, the issues that came out of the early parts of last year, moving into COVID, having deaths on top of all these other issues that are happening. Then you start having these forms of isolation, and it's an echo chamber. And we've got to be able to figure out, how do we continue to provide spaces for people to simply just be. I don't need to process. I just need a quiet space. And those are going to be critical moving forward, even still. So
I know personally for me, I don't even think I realized it until a couple days ago. But I was at an event on Zoom. I know Neff was there too. We were talking about it prior to this. And it was the first time Dr. Sumner and everyone that I'd been in a space with just other Black people to talk about what was going on from last summer. And I shared things that I didn't even know that were so hard for me. And I got emotional multiple times throughout the entire event, but I didn't realize the trauma that I was holding and the fear that I had and the frustrations that I had. And so I think these conversations in these spaces are incredibly important. And just speaking personally, like I said, these are hard things. And I have spent the last 9 months telling myself that I was fine and everything was fine and I would be okay in X, Y, and Z amount of time. But it wasn't until then where I was sharing things that I had dealt with since childhood that I'd never spoken about before, that I realized just how important all these things are going to be for the community and other people like myself and everybody.
Well, and you start, right? That's the things that we don't hold up, that we don't really share publicly. They're like another ding. And so when we're trying to explain to people what racial battle fatigue is, that it is a real thing, that you are constantly measuring, is that set for this? Is that for that? Are they taking me? I will say this. One of the benefits and blessings of working at HBCU, and that's where my first university experience was, I never had to worry about them questioning my competence because of my color. Like if they didn't, if there was an issue, it wasn't because I was Black, because everybody there was, almost everybody there was Black. So it was a question about competence in general. When you get into spaces and you're like, are they saying the same thing I'm saying because they don't think that I'm competent to say this? Or is it they're saying it because they recognize that people don't hear it if it's coming from me, because I'm a person of color or a woman in a space and you need someone else to vouch for you? Like, you're constantly filtering those things and processing. Again, when you have a public facing persona and you're in these spaces and yet you're dealing with, I heard this thing. Now let's add on, we just came out of last week that was hell for Texas. My mother's telling me about a cousin on Tuesday that has no heat, no water, and has nothing to cook on. And the disproportionate impact of communities of color. I'm also watching a video simulcast that's talking about the disproportionate number of suspensions and expulsions for children of color, particularly Black children. Children in kindergarten through 3rd grade are being suspended and expelled. And the percentage for Black males is 522% higher than for any other population in kindergarten through 3rd grade. That trauma through the course of 9 more years of education to get to high school. And then 4 years of high school with the backdrop of people questioning your competence, treating you as though you have a discipline issue, telling you that you should not be in the space, wanting you to go away because of behavioral issues. And then they get to the university. And how do we greet them? See, that's what we have to take into consideration when we think about serving our students. It is not that they show up on our doorstep with a brand new experience. They are bringing 12, 16 years of things that have happened to them. And if we act like that does not exist, we are not serving. Okay, I'm gonna stop talking.
And I'll add to that, looking at the overdiagnosis of children, Black children and other children of color, being diagnosed, improperly diagnosed with ADHD or any oppositional defiant or any of those other things that our kids are being diagnosed at because people don't know how to interact or how to handle. So it feeds into that pipeline that is the truth. I mean, there is a pipeline. So just a little more to add to what Dr. Sumner said.
And if I can just tag a little bit onto that, we cannot dismiss or negate, minimize the impact of recent political season, right? Because that's still fresh, their wounds. And then when you were like, okay, maybe we're getting over it, then January 6th happens. And they were like, okay, everyone has to see this. And then shortly thereafter, there is the hearing, right? And the voting. And so it's like a residual, like you're always getting bruised. So it's kind of having a scab that never really heals because you keep picking at it, except you're not picking at it, others are. And then you're still supposed to smile and go forth and be productive. And, you know, you're still worried about COVID, you know, for those of us who have parents who are in the age range that are, you know, most affected, right? You're worried about them, shortage of vaccines, fear of vaccine, and you're still Black, right? And so it's a continuum. And so it's not we're asking for pity or mercy. It's just a reality that we learn to juggle. And when you realize, as we talk about Black History Month, these are issues that have had to be juggled throughout our time in America. I think it really kind of just puts it back in full circle that it's a continuum. It's not a this and then this. It was the civil rights era and voting rights, and it's like this all of it simultaneously taking place.
I definitely agree on all that as well. I just wanted to piggyback what was also mentioned. You know, in terms of like, you know, the overwhelmingness of having all that in the background, and then also, you know, coming to work, and, you know, it can be overwhelming. And I know for me, you know, I've definitely had to turn myself off, or at least part of myself off in terms of the media, you know, because it seems like in the media in general, you know, there's definitely a cycle. You know, there's like a peak of interest and it dies down, peaks of interest throughout the seasons and throughout the years. And, you know, in terms of just trying to handle all that information coming at you and all the questions that may come at you all at once, you know, it can be overwhelming. And so, you know, one of the things that for me, for my own self, is definitely have that self-healing and coping and giving myself time to digest and to, you know, process all of the information and, you know, the events that have happened previously. You know, for instance, you know, I definitely have had a couple families. My brother, who has 3 kids, last week, who did not have water or electricity for nearly the whole week, and, you know, trying to make sure to support him, and also my other family members as well. So, you know, having that all in the background, you know, that's just an example of, you know, those instances where I've had to like have time for myself to process information and moving forward, particularly for myself as, you know, an individual of intersectionality, an individual of color, not just an individual of color, but, you know, I would say like intersectionality, you know, is where all of us, you know, men, women, you know, of race, of different religions, you know, of different age groups, you know, we all inhabit these spaces, but we have these different areas we inhabit all at once, right? And so in terms of moving forward, I know for myself, you know, as an openly gay Afro-Latino Black man, veteran, you know, I definitely, you know, have to move forward and trying to, you know, deal with all these complicated issues that still continue to impact our communities of color, you know, and of communities, you know, of minority community, other minority communities. And so, you know, it's not easy to do so at times, but, you know, knowing that we have support, you know, especially at Texas Tech is, you know, greatly amazing to have. So, yeah.
Wow, like I thought I was gonna be ready to follow up and go back and like go off this, because I share a lot of these experiences to a point. We have different experiences, but I do know that when you, Dr. Summer, you were talking a little bit about, you know, the experiences that people of color, that students of color go throughout their education, how that can affect them moving forward. Neff kind of knows this a little bit. That was a little bit of my experience, because I didn't even think I would make it to community college if I didn't go to the Upward Bound program, where I was welcomed, honestly, and this is just kind of because of the area that we're in, by my first educators of color. Everyone up to that point had never been of color. I had, I think, just one Hispanic teacher, and that was our Spanish teacher. But still, outside of that, you never really saw anything. And Upward Bound is when I started seeing people like Nev, other students of different colors also come together. And that is what helped drive me, and where I actually found that I had stories and experiences that were similar to other people. And so that was a really amazing experience. And then also a little bit about like Cory, how you were talking about like exhaustion, like these things just keep building up, like we don't get time to really process it, because it's, even if we do get little wins here and there, it's like it's a win, but we have to move on to the next thing, because there's just so much of it that has built up over time that we are having to get through it to keep making progress. And it's something that hard that keeps going on. And it's hard, especially I feel like for people of color, because we also come from this mindset that we can't, I guess, or at least this might be for me, y'all can definitely have your opinions on this, but we can't always ask for help. I feel like that's been ingrained in us. It's like you have to work through it. You have to work through it. You have to keep going, because you're not going to get handouts or things like that. And as someone who was from a community of color and who was also low income, also member of LGBTQ, you just have to hold on to those things until you get to where you're going, because if you like, you have probably experiences in the past where you tried to like ask for help and you didn't get it, or you got some backlash on it, or whatever it may be. So all that to say is like, we do have these new initiatives in place, like you have the healing spaces, which is great. And we have programs like the TRIO program here in place to help our students who are going through education. And we have counseling centers. So some of these things are definitely in place because they are sincere. There's people behind them that are running them because they know the experiences, they share the experiences. So my question for you is, how can other people, or like, what are some ways that we can see those sincere activities, those sincere efforts in place compared to people or other initiatives in place that are just kind of like performance activism, where they say they're helping, they're doing something, they get behind the cause, but then afterwards they're just like, well, that issue's already kind of gone, so we're just kind of gonna go away with it. Like, what are some other, or like, what are ways that people can avoid that, and what are ways that people that may be involved with those activities, who sees them not being as active as they once were, continue that energy?
Well, and let me, I think one of the things that I know there are policies. One of the first things I was greeted with when I got here was people love their OPs. Yes, they do. I'm going to ask people, care for the people. The OPs we can address. But if you're not caring for the needs, I'm often in conversations like this saying, as Neff talked about, don't ask me to legitimize, to substantiate, to prove to you that what I'm telling you is how I'm feeling, that I need to be able to prove it. Like, you want documentation that my trauma, my hurt, my concerns, my fears are real. There's one thing when you're asking me to legitimize it. The other is helping you understand it. And if you need people to legitimize, well, you don't seem like, I didn't ask you whether I seemed like it or not, because I know, Jake, what you were talking about is, you can't ask for help. I was raised by a very strong, and I'm not saying anything about who you were raised by. My story, I was raised by a very strong Black woman who was like, you're gonna learn how to open the door yourself, because I'm not always gonna be here for you. And you're gonna figure out how to tune a car, and you're gonna cut grass, and you're gonna learn all these other things. And I was back in the day, latchkey kid. I came home many days by myself, fixed my own teeth. My husband and I laugh about the crunchy potatoes. I don't know. I'm aging myself. I don't even know. Cory may have had the tray dinners that you'd have to put in the oven and wait for 45 minutes for it to heat, and then your potatoes would get the crunch on it. You'd have the meat with the gravy and the peas and the carrots that were like mush. I can't tell you how many times I had those. And I can't tell you how many times I had to have a pot pie. And doing homework on my own. I was not a very good student, but I was left to my own devices. But I also then went, again, working in an HBCU where the women were like, you will not walk in with excuses. You will have an agenda. You will know your business. This is the way you handle your business. So the other side of that is, we often talk about resilience, but I don't think people draw on that as an asset. We have often operated a lot of our programming. Oh, in spite of things, you've done so well. Like, you should stop doing that to people. Instead say, What did it take for you to get here? Jake, you went through this, and somewhere there's a strength that you called upon. There's a resource you learned about. How do we replicate that for someone else? See, that's what we need to do, and stop using kind of this deficit model to think that people are surviving and just getting by. I have generations of Black folks that came before me in my family that survived a lot of things for me to be sitting in this chair. So I don't have to draw on a weakness of the people I come from. But what I need to be able to do is, what do I do to leverage my place to help the next person who didn't have the same advantages? And so when I talk about privilege, I know I get on my soapbox about this stuff. I'm grateful this is my job. I get to do this all the time. But you know, when we start talking about privilege, I wish people would stop seeing that as a negative term. Stop seeing the opportunities or the way you lived as something negative. I didn't have to think about where my next meal was coming from. I didn't have to think about how college was going to get paid for because my mother paid cash. I do not make a secret of that. I did not come from a first generation college experience. I didn't have those as concerns. But because I didn't have them means I need to be all the more aware that other people do. And in that space, I need to be able to help them understand how to navigate these pathways. The biggest issue I see is folks don't know the inside. They know the outside. And if we don't make it familiar, we talk about research like it's a known quantity. Stop doing that. What does it mean for somebody? Stop making students feel like it's okay to say, research isn't for me. You shop online, that's research. You're looking for the best deal on those shoes? That's research. You want to find an apartment and you use a booklet to figure out which one? That's research. That's what we need to ingrain in our students, that these things are not bad. They're good. Okay, I'm hitting mute because I keep doing. And by the way, Shruti just sent out an email. First Gen Summit is coming up. Y'all need to understand, those are the kinds of things you get involved with. Don't say you're too busy. Find time. Now I'm hitting mute.
And the church said amen. I think there are those entities in our community who wanted to throw dollars at the cause because it makes them feel better, right? Some are genuinely, as you articulated, sincerely committed and wanting to become more engaged because they realized there were some blind spots that they were not paying attention to. And so now you're apprehensive, I mean, you're more conscious of it. You want to do something. You want to support initiatives. I applaud them. We don't need people just throwing dollars though, right? You need people who that's their thing, but you need some people who are boots on the ground, people who will not just be allies, but will be co-conspirators. I was telling Neff earlier, I was in the grocery store yesterday and a Anglo gentleman had on a shirt that said Black Lives Matter. And I wanted to go have a whole entire conversation with him in the COVID era, because I felt like, okay, we need more of that. It's not just talking about it in secret, right? And not saying, oh, I feel your pain. How are you engaged? What are you doing in your circles? What are you doing in your sphere of influence to help bring attention to these issues, to have those difficult conversations, and to be an active participant towards the change we all want to see? I think that's what we need, more than just people trying to anesthetize themselves from the reality that we live in a harsh world.
Yeah, I also agree with all that as well. You know, just to piggyback on that, you know, it's really great. I mean, it's really hot in terms of like, you know, it's popular whenever, you know, you have, you know, these cycles where people are on board, but, you know, whenever it's not in the news media, you know, it's kind of forgotten. And it's kind of assumed that, oh, well, things are great for everybody. But, you know, we all have to come to work every day with the same bodies, intersectional bodies that we inhabit, you know, and sometimes those situations may not change at all. Or, you know, I hope, you know, definitely, you know, all of us do hope that there's significant change that impacts our lives in a positive way, where we're a lot closer to being equal, you know, in terms of being, you know, citizens in this great country. But there's still a lot of discussions, you know, a lot of bias that is still needs to be discussed and to be confronted on. You know, one of the things, I think one of the biggest bias that we all inhabit or that we all possess is naive realism, which is essentially what it is that, you know, we have a standard like my life, I can judge people by how my life is based. I have my standards, so therefore everybody has the standards that I have. And so that's a huge bias, because the fact is we're not all born in equal settings, especially not in this country, definitely not in this world. And so that bias, is something that people walk through their lives without even questioning, and it's kind of, it's very, especially in American culture, in terms of, like, for example, how we value masculinity over femininity, right? It's kind of like, knowing that we, in terms of workspaces, I'm very grateful for the department that I work in terms of accounting services, because there's a good amount of women, that are managing our department, which is very unusual compared to other corporate accounting services, particularly the corporate section where it's mainly male dominated, mainly white male dominated. And so in terms of, seeing that, for me, I see opportunity for women to be as equal as men are. And so there's still a lot of discussion and moving forward with that, but that's just an example of how, we have to confront those biases of, especially with naive realism, to say we're not all equal. There's still a lot of work to be done, especially in terms of equal pay for women, for example. How do we have those discussions there? In terms of making sure that diversity, our communities of color lack in terms of the wealth. There's a huge wealth gap and definitely an income gap. How do we have those discussions there? In terms of these biases are costing us, not just costing our lives, but also costing jobs, innovation, in terms of having productive discussions, moving forward as a society, and as a world. So, we definitely need to have, be aware of our biases moving forward with that.
And along with that, one of the things that I see a lot of is especially with listening to some of these conversations that I've heard in this past year, especially, be sincere. I think there is a lot of sincerity that's lacking. And something that I've heard a lot of, and it makes my skin crawl, is well, my Black friend said, or my this friend said, or what have you. I understand that you have a friend of color or a marginalized friend. That's great. But let's move past that. Let's actually dig deeper into the situation. Your one friend or a very small handful of friends that are marginalized or minoritized don't speak for the collective. They may not have that that experience that other people have, but yet and still their experience is valid, but you can't invalidate other people's experiences based off of your one Black friend or your one Latinx friend or your one LGBTQIA friend. You're not doing anyone a favor with your one friend and comparing everything against that one friend. Please be completely sincere in your efforts, and please make sure that you're honestly open to hearing what people have to say and hearing the experiences of the collective. Because we can always hide behind that one person that we know, but we need to open ourselves up to the collective experience and not just hide behind the one.
Thank you, guys. I really loved and appreciated hearing all that. And we are winding down on time, and I know Dr. Sumner has to run here. So we're kind of going to move forward with an audience question. But I did want to say, for me personally, my issue with performance activism, or for companies saying, we don't stand by this, but kind of going back on their word or taking it back or saying that and then being done with that, is that I don't get the chance to stop being Black. I don't get the chance to stop being a woman. I don't get the chance to stop living these things that are my harsh reality that hurt me every single day. So for you to say something and for me to 100% believe that you believe that my life is important, or other people who are similar to me's life important, and then for you to take that back because you can, hurts us all twice as much. And so I wanted to drop and say that because this conversation is making me realize how important these things are and how hard I mean, even harder that people in the community have it besides myself, like Dr. Sumner. I mean, I have privilege. I got to go to a university, get a couple of degrees, be in this position to have a platform to speak for other people. And so why not step into a situation where you can be better for other people? Why should we shy away from that? But I did want to go ahead and run through, we have an audience question that was submitted. So go ahead and ask that. So it says, how do you professionally respond to situations on campus when students, or we can use staff, faculty, whoever, use hate language against others, but are pardoned or excused because of freedom of speech, student code of conduct, anything like that? And I think not only how can we address that, but how can we even turn that into a situation in which we're allowing other people who may not be part of the BIPOC community to be allies, to take that as a teaching moment, to make that a better situation overall. So if you guys want to go ahead and tackle that one.
Well, and so let me share one thing. I've been sitting here scrolling on my phone because I was looking for this article, and it talks about, it's CNN, Black women's roles in the civil rights movements have been understated, but that's changing. And it's the first in a series of articles that's talking about history refocused. And they're actually raising the name of Claudette Colvin, who 10 months prior to Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus, was arrested, but was not selected as the face of the civil rights movement because of the reasons around her being youthful versus Rosa Parks' perceptions. Anyway, it talks about Black women's role in Black Panther Party. It talks about the LGBTQ being a part of the Black Lives Movement, which has not been a part of how we as a community have moved forward. It's really, if you want to be informed about the way that history can be written without speaking to certain things, and it just moves it away, that's one thing. Let me say this, professionally responding to something. I'm picking up on a word, so I don't know if the person intends to make it about professional. There is a way that we respond to things at the university, which is one, recognizing that people are going to say things that are going to be hateful or hurtful, and it is within their right to say them, but it doesn't mean that it has to go unchallenged. The other is, when you hear those and you're in that space, are you speaking to them? Do you sit back and let it happen? You know, again, is it a person of color that's hearing another person of color? Is it a person of color that's hearing someone that's white? Is it someone that's white that's hearing someone that's white that's saying something about a person of color? We have the ability to speak up. Everybody is not necessarily going to be comfortable doing that. But I do think that we have to find ways to be able to support individuals who in the moment might be a target of some of that, in being able to say, we don't all agree with what's being said. We do not stand as an acknowledgement of that. Personally, we can say, I don't stand with this person on what they're saying. And fighting speech with more speech is one of the options that people have. The other is in recognizing when we're in those spaces. I get very concerned. We talk about the emotional toll that is taken on people when these things occur. And so part of what my hope is, I'm not trying to get people in trouble. If anything, it is working to address issues before they arise. I feel like we are sometimes trying to catch it on the tail end. Oops, they've said something, or not even oops. Somebody said something, now we need to respond. Instead of creating a dynamic that says, people who hold a certain perception, you know, that perception of being racist is not something that we accept. And you establish that. But this is also, how do we speak with our friends? Like, this is not like I'm in a space and, oh, my friend said a joke. No, I don't let that stand. So I think we need to look at how we operate in spaces just across the board, that people don't develop kind of this sense of strength by one time. Like, it's called a practice. Like, you've got to learn how to be someone who does this, which is why the workshops are provided, why these opportunities to explore identities are there, because we've got to move away from the ignorance that exists, the hatefulness that is there. How do we go about addressing it? And no, it is not fair to be able to say, I got a Black friend and this Black friend has done things. Everybody is Mychael talks about identity, salience. When does it become more or less relative in your life. And if someone is operating, I'm not going to say that that is an excuse, but if someone has operated out of a self-protective mode where I laugh along with the jokes because otherwise I become the joke. Sometimes that happens in spaces. And so just because your Black friend goes along with the joke doesn't mean that they've accepted it. It's a coping mechanism. There can be a lot of reasons why a person doesn't say anything. So don't assume because they've said nothing that they've gone along with it. But I think as a professional, if you're in a space and you're in a role of an administrator, you have the ability to say, hey, that kind of conversation, while you're entitled to your opinion, we really want to be able to look at this through this frame. You can reframe that conversation. And we've had situations in classroom environments where things have gone sideways. And I've asked, so you're working with master's degree students or graduate students or undergrad, have them approach it. Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization. You'll hear people say things like that. And it's like, really, where's your research? Where's the scholarship? Where does it say that? Like, put something behind it instead of operating off of these subjective notions that people have. Show me the facts. And let's talk about these things instead of reacting out of emotion. The other thing I'll say is, like, when you're walking by somebody, when you can, just keep walking. Don't entertain it. Because sometimes people show up for a performance and they're waiting for someone to stand there so they can say something. I just keep walking.
I think you have to pick your battles. Not every battle is worth the sweat and tears. I had a really dear friend. He was an older gentleman. He used to say to me, Cory, ignorance will always be louder than intelligence because there's more of it. Right. And I used to think that doesn't make sense. And then I realized it's like you're always going to have people who say stuff and they're going to be the noise. And you have to focus on what matters. And you can burn yourself out trying to put out all the little bitty fires, or you can take your efforts and focus them in areas that matter most. And so sometimes people are going to say what they want to say because they can. Sometimes they do it because they are trying to get you to react or get you worked up. And then your whole day, your whole week is messed up because of somebody's stupidity, right? So you choose. Like, I see things, I hear things all the time, and I sometimes walk away, as Dr. Sumner said. And then there are those times where you feel like you have to be engaged, but you can't be engaged all the time. You can't fight every battle, but it is troubling, right? And this is an institution of higher learning, which means that people can have diverse and divergent thoughts, and they can say what they want to say, and you don't have to agree with them. They can have political views or whatever, and we can respect their right, even when they're wrong, in our opinions. I think that's the best way to say it.
Disagreeing civilly. I mean, we've lost that skill set somewhere. And it's, I don't have to agree. And I've had conversations with people where I'm like, you and I will never see eye to eye on that. But there are other things that we've had conversations about where they're a parent or they want the best for their children, or they don't want to be subjective to, you know, again, as Mychael talks about it, one identity. You see me as Black. You don't know these other things about me. So let's create relationships that allow people to be fully who they are. You know, I laugh with Cory and others when I'm like, my husband was a pastor for many years, so I was a preacher's wife. I cuss now, but you know, that's the way it was. I wasn't the hat wearing one, but I do understand the politics of the church. I was a Girl Scout at one point. I understand what it is to sell Girl Scout cookies. They've moved digital. That's a very different world, but I understand the principles and the basics. I ran track in high school. Wasn't very good, but I understand team, right? There are things we all bring. And yet, since I've been here, Brenda Martinez, wherever she is, I love that woman. She allowed me to be able to follow and go with her children when they were showing pigs at one of their shows, and they were waiting on the judge, but they led me into their family experience to see what happens in that environment where communities come together to support children that have learned how to care for an animal, recognizing it's a life cycle, that it's not a pet, but they've also have to reconcile with death because it goes to the slaughterhouse at some point. But they allowed me to come into that space. Where have you crossed your own comfort to go and explore someone else's lived experience? Because here's what I took away from one of the best experiences in my grad program. I wanted to focus on Black students. And I had a master's, my advisor at the point said, Carol, I'm not saying that you understand all of that experience, but you do understand what it is to be a Black student. Do you understand what it's like to be Greek and a member of the LGBTQ community? And that for me was this moment like, other people have different experiences. And if I don't take the time to learn theirs, how could I expect they would learn mine? We have to take the time to, if you want your children, and this is one of the truest things you can say, if you want your children to understand diversity, if you want your nieces or nephew or your students, look around, how diverse are your own friends? And don't go saying, well, I need to make a token friend. I'm not saying do that. What I'm saying is take an interest in someone else's lived experience, because you have no idea what you will learn from those opportunities. And that's where we start breaking down the boundaries of these lived biases of this. Everybody has this. If we tell children that are from low income families, oh, you're poor. But guess what? They grew up in a household with family members, every imaginable combination of having love experience through a strong family foundation. But we make it about how much money your family makes. We don't get them value to see. You come from a family that loves you. Everyone does not have that, right? Those are the things we've got to be able to draw on, because there's too much we could look at as a deficit. We don't need to do that. So strike up a conversation with people. I never met a stranger, but that's just me. Maybe it's the preacher's wife. Okay, mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Summer. Thank you, everyone. Definitely leaving on the high note of sharing and experiences. That's very important. That's one of the things that Red Talks hopes to do. And I know all of you are creating programming for people to get involved and also share experiences and learn more about one another. We are going to be happy to put all the links to all the events that are coming up. So if there's anything else that pops up, let us know. We will push it out, social media, email, whatever we can to help out. But we're over time, unfortunately, but we could always keep going because this is a conversation that needs to be had, but we will do that another time. Thank you all for coming in and speaking with us. Thank you to everyone for joining us today, especially during your lunch hour. We really appreciate it. Virtual round of applause for our panelists, and also a virtual round of applause for our new co-host. Thank you all for the knowledge, the experiences, and just the advice to go forward in the future, especially when it comes to diversity. We hope to have you again on our panelists again soon. But yeah, other than that, everyone have a great rest of your day and a rest of your week, and we'll see you next month.